Having a transgender child comes with its own unique challenges and decisions. Dr. Michelle Forcier specializes in adolescent medicine at Hasbro Children's Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island. Dr. Forcier, how do you diagnose a child who does have gender identity disorder?
I think the biggest factor and I try to stay actually away from the word diagnosis. I think that gender is ubiquitous. We all are gendered and we all eventually become sexual. And what we should be doing is, rather than diagnosing a child and putting a label and considering this something pathologized, asking all our kids, what do you like to play with? What do you like to do in terms of activities? What do you like to dress? I think the big thing is we listen to what they say.
But what's the difference between being a tomboy? I mean, I was a real tomboy as a kid. You know, in 5th and 6th grade, I liked to play Army, and I liked to pretend like I was shooting guns and doing all sorts of kind of roughhousing that boys would normally do. And I was very proud of that, you know, because I was a good athlete and a fast runner. TMI. But anyway, so I'm reliving my childhood suddenly. But how do you know the difference between being a tomboy and liking to do boy things and actually identifying as a boy?
Sure. Did you ever want to be a boy? Did you ever want boy parts?
No.
And I think there's the difference, is many of the gender nonconforming children, and I call them gender nonconforming sort of in the prepubertal years, because we don't necessarily know what's going to happen over time in terms of their gender and their sexuality, two very different things. So there's a lot of different ways that you can ask kids just who they are, how do they feel, what do you feel more like a boy or a girl, really serves a great purpose, and it's a simple question to ask.
But I imagine this has to be asked repeatedly as a child develops.
So when we're talking about transgender or gender nonconformity in kids, it's not one moment in time. We're not talking about, you know, a boy that plays with his sister's dolls for a week or two and then says, ugh, I'm not interested in that. We're talking about kids who consistently, persistently, and often insistently say, I want to dress, express, and be the other gender.
Is there any scientific explanation for people who feel they were born in the wrong body?
There's a lot of interesting theories about structures in the brain that control hormones. There's theories about in utero exposure to androgens, male hormones. So there's theories out there about what might happen. There used to be these, again, parenting theories that we don't really pay much attention to anymore. We don't know. What I try to say when parents ask me, why did this happen, is saying we don't know why it happened, but what we do know is, again, loving your kid and letting your kid be themselves is the best answer to the why and the what.
Puberty blockers are very important because it does sort of stave off adolescence and in a way buys these kids some time.
Yeah, puberty blockers are completely reversible. So I'll tell parents, this is a medicine where we can completely, if we're not sure, we can go right back, exact same progress around that natal gender, with fertility not being affected, with secondary sexual characteristics not being affected. Totally reversible.
Then children move on to, or teenagers move on to the hormones, as we saw in Devin's case. And this is not reversible, and it's more of a commitment to actually proceeding forward.
There are irreversible aspects of testosterone and estrogen that we have to make very clear up front in terms of what does this mean regarding fertility. There are certain body changes that may not go back after you've been exposed to estrogen and testosterone. So it's not something kids or families take lightly, and not something the medical profession takes lightly either.
I guess a lot of people who are not that familiar with this whole topic may think, gee, a 12, 14, 16-year-old, how does that individual really know? How are they equipped to make such a life-altering decision, literally?
Right. And I've had some parents say, this is like, you know, playing God. And it's not playing God. It's us as parents and as providers, as mental health professionals, listening to kids and believing what kids tell us. Not just a one-time statement, but letting a child tell their story over time and really listening to that story and putting away our misconceptions. These kids have thought about their bodies and the meaning of their identity they've thought about their brain, their hormones in their bodies in ways that cisgender people just don't think of.
Well, it's fascinating to hear you speak of it, and obviously you know a lot about the subject. So, Dr. Michelle Forcey, we really appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
And educating us today. And when we come back, we're going to meet Chris, who used to be Grace. That's right after this.